Welcome to the Doctor's Mentor Show. If you believe that medicine is an industry and not a profession, if you enjoy submitting complex reimbursement claims, or you would do another residency just for fun, be advised, you're about to be offended. You should probably leave now.
All this talk about mentoring doctors is ridiculous. I thought doctors learned to do everything better than everyone else the first year of medical school. At least that's the way they act.
If you love assisting patients with vitality breakthroughs, if the right to practice medicine without interference is important, and you want expert tips for practice freedom and profits to support your epic life, welcome aboard and prepare to be blown away. The Doctor's Mentor Show starts now. Here's your host, Dr. Lori Barr.
Hi, it's Dr. Lori Barr here, and I am in Phoenix, Arizona with Victoria Peghamberrian, CEO of Paradise Ridge Dentistry. And Victoria, I met at the Business Expert Forum at Harvard University this summer. She just amazed me with her depth of knowledge in systems and in roles and how that helps a solo practice healthcare provider scale their business. She has an amazing story, and she's going to share it with us today. So I'm so excited to have you here on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited and privileged to be here.
Before we get started, let me just tell you a little bit about her education. She got her bachelor's degree at the University of Arizona, and she is a master of communications. Even though bachelor's is the degree, she is an expert communicator. Her master's degree is in public administration, which is much more difficult than business administration. And why is that?
You have no money to begin with.
And then she made a career as a systems analyst with two major defense contractors in Germany before her husband, who is a dentist, retired from the military. Is that right? Did he retire? Retired from the military and started his own practice. And she is going to tell us about the adventure they had when he agreed to buy a practice and how they got their start as an S Corp.
Legacy.
Today's topic.
About 10 years ago, my husband had come out of the military, and he had been a base commander in Germany, meaning the head honcho dentist. And he was used to that. So he got here and decided he did not want to work for someone. He wanted his own practice. He purchased his own practice, and within 2 weeks called me at home and said, "Honey, you need to come now. We're in trouble." And I came and figured out quickly that he had purchased a practice from, let's just say, some unsavory folks. And the total of the fraud was over $1.4 million. So it was a pretty ugly situation. And I knew nothing about dentistry at all, and much less insurance and how that works, or our systems database. Yeah.
Wow. So that's where they started. So how many of us who are healthcare professionals have a wonderful spouse who wants to support us no matter what we need? And how many of us, they're the first person we call when we're in desperate trouble and need somebody to come quickly? I've been there. I know you have too. So here you were. How far in debt were y'all?
Over $1.4 million.
So $1.4 million in debt, and now your business has scaled to?
It should do 3.5 this year.
$3.5
million
this year. Amazing growth over a 10-year period. And so what we're going to talk about today is taking a practice from phase 1 to phase 2 and how what that takes to really get started at phase 1 and how to move to phase 2. So first, let's define what phase 1 is for a solo practice dentist, and then what phase 2 looks like, so people know what we're talking about.
Okay. So phase 1 for the purposes of this is basically while you are starting out and getting your operations up and running. And it's primarily just the practitioner and one other person, which is typically a family member, because they are free. Especially in our case, we had negative income. And so I was a free employee. And at that point, there are three aspects that, from what I have gained, that I see as important. And they are learning the profession, in my case, dentistry, learning the database system that you need to run that business, and learning the insurance. Because in any kind of healthcare field, you need to know what the insurance, how that plays, and all of the players, and you have to have systems for all of that.
So the only thing they teach us in our professional schools out of that in any depth is the lingo for our profession. So like I know the radiology lingo, I know the medical lingo. You now know the language of dentistry. And how long did it take you to learn the lingo? It
took about a year to understand fully the lingo. And for instance, the ADA codes associated with the lingo. There is a lot to learn. And if you make a small mistake, it shows up quickly in you do not get paid. So there's a lot of detail that has to be gone over. And that's why when you're just starting out, it's a catch-22. You've got all of these things going on, and it's just you and your provider trying to make it a go. And in our case, we had my husband and myself, and I had convinced a older woman to come out of retirement to help me learn, essentially, to speed up. So those three areas, she worked with me on nights and weekends trying to teach me while I was in the practice and after hours. And it sped up the learning quite a bit.
So y'all were way negative in the hole.
Mm-hmm.
I assume, well, I can't assume anything. What was the very first thing you had to do to start making progress of digging out, besides learning the lingo? How did you establish processes that made it so your husband could see the patients and you could deal with everything else?
Essentially, once I understood those three areas, and especially even in the middle of learning them, what I did was create checks and balances to see what we were bringing in and what we were paying out. That was number one. Anyone in business, you have to figure that out.
So in business, that's sometimes called a profit and loss sheet. Now in medicine, you may call it cash receivable, accounts in, and expenses. I mean, it can be called a lot of different things, but if you're talking business lingo, it's usually the profit and loss sheet.
Yes, because someone has to be responsible for that. And so in our case, that's actually how I found out we were being embezzled from way back when. And, once again, you understand how ledgers work in your database system and how the insurance works, because it's all part of that puzzle. And so, in a normal ledger system, you don't have insurance as an issue. It's just, did the patient pay or did they not pay? And why is there a gap in the money there? When you have insurance, there's a pause in that, and you have to learn about insurance. For instance, secondary insurance. I'm sure you've run into that.
Oh, yeah.
That holds the money off further. And so you have all of those things to learn about, not only the processes, but the time elapsed,
right?
For those things, so that you're counting on a certain amount of money coming in. And so those, I would say, first things first, that's the first thing you have to learn, because you will not be in business long unless you really get an idea of the money and where it's going out and how it's coming in. And so that's why that's so important to learn the database, and in our field, the insurance as well.
Did you have to do any emergency type interventions to keep money from going out?
What we did is we just played it lean at first. We hired an assistant, and originally and many of your dentist or doctor clients can see this, is that when you're in the beginning stages, you do a lot as a sole proprietor. You're doing accounting, you're doing, assisting the doctor. You'll see that in small dental practices as well. They'll hire one person to do both administrative and clinical, versus having very defined, as you get bigger, you have defined jobs.
And I would say that nowadays, with all of the automated systems and electronic medical records and dental records, while it's kind of a hassle to get into a system, it does make it easier than ever for someone to start their practice and move through that process a little less painfully than maybe 10 years ago.
Yes. Now there are several companies that, for instance, a CRM is a great investment, especially customer relationship management system, because that can do a lot of your confirmations, and dealing with, outstanding treatment and outstanding, maintenance. So there's a lot of things. Shop that very well, especially as a, sole proprietor. It is a big deal. That's one very baseline thing that is helpful in cutting down some of your cost in time as well.
And having the bookkeeper mentor who could help you recognize those deadlines. Because I know when you make a mistake on submitting that insurance billing, you only have a certain amount of time that you can resubmit.
Yes.
So knowing those deadlines or having a system, an automatic system that flags that for you so that you know those deadlines are coming up.
Absolutely.
And aside from just the CRM, also you mentioned how important it was to have a mentor. Tell me a little bit about what your mentor actually did for you.
She actually came out of retirement. She was retired, and I had called her and she couldn't find anyone to help me. So she came out of retirement for 2 days a week. And she had worked for Cigna, Aetna, and some of the biggest dental companies in town. And she showed me the ins and outs of insurance, which really was a game changer as well. Because once you not only understand dentistry in my end, but the insurance, you can get inside the insurance company's head and see how they're going to make decisions. Mm-hmm. And that is also game changing, because if you'd like to get paid, you need to know how they rule with an iron fist.
So how much of a time saver, your learning curve was very steep. Mm-hmm. By having the mentor, how did that change it? Do you think what percentage, how much longer would it have taken you to get up to speed had you not had a mentor?
Oh, longer for sure. Because we also had a fraud. So the previous owners had taken out $750,000 in our name, and then the practice fraud in addition was over almost $700,000 in itself. And so basically having her come on enabled me to learn at a beginning, intermediate, and then advanced level. While she was doing some of the advanced level things to keep us up and running, I could learn to catch up. And that was impactful, especially because everyone needs to get paid. So I'm envisioning a drowning person, and the lifeguard has come. Yes.
And the lifeguard is making progress toward the shore while you're taking breaths and learning how to swim without panicking again.
And I mean, I can relate to that for those people who are out there. I can completely relate to that, because I was the drowning person out in the ocean, and I found my own lifeguard, and it made it a huge impact. And I will say that was a life lesson for me in general, is that I, even to this day, even at the level that we're at, I hire coaches for myself. And I know you're in agreement with that as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I think that is part of my commitment to this company in growing to be a bigger and better CEO as we move up the ladder. So when it's just mom and pop in an operation, I mean, how do you decide, at what point do you get a CEO? Wow. That's on the upper end of phase 2. Okay. Basically where we're at now at about $3.5 million. It's the equivalent of most dental practices with a sole practitioner. Once they get up and running, they can do roughly around 1.2 to 1.6, depending on the kind of practice they have, if they're well run. So that's, I would say, at the top end of phase 1. So if you're looking at it as far as when you're looking at a growth thing, people think it goes like this. It doesn't. It's almost like you're climbing a series of mountains, almost like when you look at the, the index, S&P 500 or any other thing, it grows like this. And so I would say that's how those stages of growth go in that respect, is that anywhere from 0 to about 1.6, you're in phase one.
And how do you know if your practice is well run?
So the way you know is if the systems are being followed and there's accountability.
Wait. That means you have to have systems. Hello?
Yes, I'm sorry. You have to develop systems.
Healthcare practitioners trying to do it all yourself. Systems are required. And if you don't know how to create systems, find somebody who does.
Yes. I mean, to be honest with you, I actually have amazing systems people, and I come in and do the final editing on that, but they have we meet, we discuss what we want. They go and write it up based on what they've been doing and what we've decided upon. And then I do a final edit.
So how do you find a great systems person?
So we use something called the Colby, but there is DISC.
So these are personality tests.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And we can assess then. I'm not a good person to write up systems. That's nails down a chalkboard for me. I'm a very bulleted points, in and out, definitive decision maker. So, but there are people who are detail oriented who really like getting into the nitty gritty and explaining it all and putting it on paper, especially. So that's what you're going to want to be looking for. And especially somebody who knows your practice and knows the feel of it as well, because some of that is written in.
Okay. All right. So back to the question I asked you before and then didn't let you answer about the well-run dental practice. So systems.
Yes.
And so the systems are being followed. What else is essential?
So you can have great systems, but if you don't have accountability for those systems, that's a disaster. And you'll find, and we've seen this as well, is through that growth phase, you can have systems, but what worked for you at one level will not work for you at the next level. And so that can be uncomfortable, but you're going to have to go back and reassess your systems and your level of accountability. And that's, I think, where you start to develop a leadership team and a CEO.
So growth is associated with flexibility. Because things are always changing.
Yes.
For the good and for the worse, for better or for worse, just like in marriage, right? And then, yes, absolutely. Now, the other thing I always hear you talking about when I hear you talk and pick your brain, which I love to do, is about roles, defined roles, and how that affects the scalability of a practice.
It does. As we had discussed further, in a group setting, it's very different than a sole proprietorship. So I come from the sole proprietorship end, and that's what I actually teach, is that when it's at that level of a sole proprietorship, I believe in family business. I do. Where in a group setting, it's completely different. But in my area of things, the family business, the provider, the professional, they go to school to learn dentistry, chiropractic, medicine, radiology. Their mind isn't wrapped around and excelling at like business principles. I mean, it's almost like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. That's just, they're out of their element. So why would you have someone who's amazing as a clinician be a business person? It's not that they're not smart, but they didn't go to school for that.
And what about for business survival? In small business, it's easy to get really attached to the people you work with.
Yes.
With scalability, though, some people aren't flexible about change. What happens when you grow? We're talking about that growth curve,
yes,
and you get up to one of those highs.
So we had that happen to us a couple of years ago. I had a staff that I had grown to be at the beginning part of this level. And, about 9 months ago, I just went through a very big change in that they couldn't handle it. I had to let go of one of my executive leaders, and it just trickled right off. And I had about 90% turnover.
Whoa, that's a big turnover.
Was tough. It was tough. It was a lot for my family to weather. I was okay. I miss them. And I think they're wonderful people. I have nothing but good things to say about them. But they're appropriate for a different kind of office at that point.
Sure.
And you have to be able to read where you are as a business leader. You have to be able to read where you are now, within your business and where you want it to go. And so, there's a statement that I don't know where it came from, but it says, dress for the job you want. Well, hire for the practice you want. That's a great quote. That's what I really believe in. Like our current ops director has managed 32 offices, and we're the equivalent of about 3.5. And so, in one location. So, it's a different bird for her, but I hired her with the intention of strategy planning for growth as well, and enforcement of those systems that are in place and maybe tweaking them for the next level. So that's what my strategy has been.
So roles are important, and you alluded to team building. And I know that the biggest way that you have, not the biggest, one way you've helped to build your team is by bringing your amazing love for fun into this practice. And I understand that fun is actually one of your core values.
It is.
So how has that impacted the growth of your team?
I think really well. We have, resumes that I get about 15 resumes a week. People want to work with us. I think we have a pretty amazing reputation. We always get best dental practice in the Valley, and it's a great feeling. And I think part of that is the fun aspect. We like doing fun things. We like, being fun. Tomorrow we're shooting a music video. So with the staff, and
I saw the props. It's going to be hilarious. We will definitely provide a link at the Doctor's Winter.
And it'll give you some idea. But we really enjoy that. In fact, I changed our employee events program to not me organizing them, but they are going to put in their suggestions. And if they get picked, it's theirs, and they get a budget, and they're doing it. And that way they get to own it and get to develop the whole thing. And so, yeah.
And that's so awesome. And that's one example of how you've incentivized your employees to contribute to the practice. But you told me about another one too that I want you to share.
Okay. So, I'm trying to think of which one you're talking about.
If an employee finds another.
Oh, yes. For hiring purposes. Yes. So because it's a sole proprietorship, which again is very different than a group practice, the functionality of it works in that it is, there's really one leader. So we don't have a group of leaders.
Yeah, there's no issue with nepotism here.
And I know that's a core value for you guys. And so, but for us, what it is that when we have our team is really strong, and when we have a really strong team and they basically go out of their way to refer someone that they believe in, that states something about them, because they're kind of putting their reputation on the line as well. And so we incentivize them that after 90 days, if that employee has gone through our gauntlet, then, and they are doing well, and we intend on keeping them, that the employee that referred them gets $300.
So isn't that a nice way to incentivize your home team to find more people just like them who you already love to work with by monetarily rewarding them when their person they've recommended actually runs the course and is going to fit in with the program? That's awesome.
Yeah.
What other, I know we're going to wrap up here pretty quickly. What other big, just stick across the forehead things should the solo practitioner who's just starting out think about so that they really can see the light at the end of the tunnel, the hump up over the exponential growth phase that's so painful? And then,
I will just say this. I'll repeat it again. I believe in family practice. That's why I do what I do. And I think that especially starting out, finding that key person who's going to support the talent that can be a free employee while they're learning, but trying to expedite that learning, figuring out the main areas that the learning is in, which my case was dentistry, the insurance, and the computer database.
And for any healthcare practice, it's going to be your lingo for your practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the database, and it's going to be how you're going to get paid, whether you're taking insurance or not, or whether you're dealing with the government for your payments.
Yes. And so but finding a way to expedite that so that free employee turns into a valuable asset for your practice. That is what makes it. I didn't start out this way. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And so once you grow past phase one, do you just leave it all behind?
No. There are several things that, I have constantly reminded myself where we were, because I think if you don't do that, it's a miss. If you don't revisit, even in your mind, a lot of the things that you went through to get to where you are now, you don't learn from the gifts you were given.
Now, in our practice, that's definitely a challenge because when we've had exponential growth, reminding new people of where we've been. How do you do that?
So you have to tell your story. You have to have someone, if you can't do it, you need to have somebody assigned to tell the story here and there to either new people coming in or people who forget what or weren't there for what that was like for the original owners and what they went through to get to this point and how grateful they are to be there.
So what ways do your employees like to hear the story?
My story is so dramatic that every time I tell it, because I tend to do it in quarterly trainings, and it may need to be assessed and done more often as part of an onboarding, which is one of the things we're looking at. But they're open mouthed because we had such a crazy story that these guys were doing dentistry on the weekends without records and for cash. They were not dentists. And so that in my field, and I'm sure resonates with you, is just shocking. And that's just one piece of the pie that we had to deal with, in addition to the fraud and the slumlord and, Mm-hmm.
And now look where she is, set to have 3 million.
3.5 this year.
3.5 million this year. CEO of this practice and scaling ever larger with very happy employees and not to mention amazingly happy patients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's such a blessing.
Your next step.
So any last parting gifts for the husband, wife, wife, the spousal team that's trying to make it? What would you?
I would say that the baseline thing that you kind of said, hits home is really have defined roles. Know your roles. And as they grow and change, you may need to change that a little bit, but have them very defined with accountability structure as well, like you're requiring of your employees.
Awesome. Well, This is just one podcast with Victoria. She's so amazing, and there's more to come. I can't share with you the juicy details of what she's creating right now. There's more to come. So make sure you check out all of the shows that Victoria is featured in. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm very excited and pleased to be here.
There's more to explore at thedoctorsmentor.com.
Are you stopping at a hospital? Hello? Don't you know that hospitals are one of the sickest places on the planet? Don't touch anything in there and get out as fast as you can.